And this is different than anything, any clinic around.
Workouts that are tailored for her, and that really makes a difference.
Really personal. I've gotten way more mobile, stronger, flexible. Just everything just improves me to the next level.
Welcome to the On Cue Performance Therapy Podcast, where we push sports performance and physical therapy to its apex. We change the game by bringing together the brightest minds in the field to offer best practices and question how things are done today. I'm your host, Mike Quintons, physical therapist and expert in sports orthopedics. I'm living my dream and opened a clinic that unites all elements of sports medicine under one roof to drive recovery and performance outcomes. What's happening, Performance Therapy Nation? This is Mike Quintons, your host of the On Cue Performance Therapy Podcast. Today, we're going to be getting into the COVID vaccine and the outlook on spring sports. Summer rolls around as well, and I'll offer some thoughts on my experience with the vaccine. Fortunate to have gotten the vaccine probably about 8 weeks ago now, and how I've been feeling since, and some of my experiences with it. I've obviously done a lot of research on it, and because of managing my office, and we have five PTs, see somewhere around probably 100 different patients a week, roughly, maybe a little bit more, not to mention athletes. I'm able to offer some insight on precautions we've taken and precautions, maybe recommend some precautions for others to take as well. But first and foremost, as always, I want to thank our listeners, subscribers. Reviews are through the roof. I think we had, I got a text the other day from Shelly that we had, I think like 500 views in less than like 30 minutes or something. So thank you. This is all very flattering and blown away by all of this. And to me, that's a tribute to not only our listeners and subscribers, but also to our guests. We've had some awesome guests lately. We kind of shifted gears towards strength conditioning, getting athletes, athletic trainers, and still some docs. We've still done a lot with docs. So that's going to be the game plan. We'll continue to take feedback from our subscribers, you guys, our listeners, and go from there and get the latest content out to you guys. So let's dive into the COVID vaccine. So first question I have is, what steps did I go through to get the vaccine? So as a medical professional, seeing patients daily, I'm fortunate enough to have been, technically 1A. So having the opportunity to receive the vaccine immediately. So that went to myself and everyone else in my office, including PTs, strength conditioning coaches, front desk, etc. So it was probably about, 6 weeks ago now, I got my first dose of Pfizer. So what I had to do was I had to call, since our company, PTW, the Physical Therapy and Wellness Institute, is based out of Montgomery County. Our contact was St. Luke's Hospital. So I called St. Luke's. We had a number to call. They asked us for our credentials. They asked me for a license number, date of birth, etc., and scheduled the appointment. So I went up on, I think the following Saturday morning, around 8 o'clock. It's about an hour drive, which a lot of people, I think, have complained about the drive that they've had to go through. But really, if you put in perspective, how fortunate are we to get the vaccine and only have to drive an hour is pretty convenient, if you ask me, when there's people all across the world who are unable to get access to it or have to go through much more of a burden to get access to it. So drove an hour, parked in the parking lot, went up to the second floor at St. Luke's Hospital in Bethlehem. They had two people waiting there. Actually, they had someone in the parking lot telling you where to park and where to go. It was all super easy. And so went up to the first floor. Two people were waiting there for me and at a table, and they asked for ID. And that was pretty much it. They asked for ID, date of birth. Moved on to the next room where there wasn't even a line, and someone had said, all right, you're good to go here. So they had me expose my arm. I gave them the card that was given to me. They signed off on it, received the injection. Took a second, just like any other flu shot. It was quick, in and out. and then went to a waiting room for about 15 minutes, I think 15 to 20 minutes. On my way into that waiting room, I scheduled my second shot, which for Pfizer is 3 weeks. So 3 weeks between appointments, but I waited about 15, 20 minutes, and I felt fine. My arm was a little sore from the shot, but that's about it. That was fine. My second shot, obviously, same place. Went up there afterwards. So I got the shot, same exact setup, waited 15, 20 minutes, was able to leave. And probably later that afternoon, it was also on a Saturday morning, later that afternoon, I was definitely a little sore. Arm was sore, a little fatigue. Made sure I hydrated the day before, that morning, and after the shot. And that night I went to bed. Usually I go to bed kind of late. So I think I fell asleep at like 8:30 and didn't wake up the next morning until like 7 a.m. And I knew I was feeling a little out of it, body aches here and there, nothing crazy, just like low back tightness and like some neck tightness. Otherwise, I was just sleepy. Like I had like 3 naps during the day. Each one was like an hour or 2 hours. And that was it. Woke up Monday morning and I was like good to go. So the day of, not a ton of symptoms. Went the next day is when it kind of hit me a little bit more so. And it was mostly fatigue. Just felt like I wanted to do stuff. I just didn't have the energy to do it. So I have our strength conditioning coach, Jordan, who has been on a couple of podcasts himself. He's had Moderna, and the second shot wiped him out. Now, he had gotten it in the middle of the week, which I wouldn't recommend, especially Moderna. Symptoms are different. Everyone's responding different to this, though, is what I've heard. But Moderna had put him out for the next day, fever, night sweats, temperature, the whole 9 yards. So body aches as well, fatigue, everything. So his symptoms were much worse. He had Moderna. So for what that's worth, my recommendation is to take the day off after the shot. The same day, depending on what time. If it's early in the morning, you may feel some symptoms later in the day. But the next day, definitely don't make many plans. It affects everyone differently. My wife had gotten the shots. She had gotten Pfizer and had no symptoms at all. Like shocked, like zero, nothing. She felt fine even the next day, first and second shot. So first shot, not a lot to I guess prepare for or much of an impact. Some people said they had felt chills in the clinic, some patients of mine, but otherwise little to no symptoms after the first shot. It's the second shot that seemed to be a lot worse for a majority of patients of mine and for our staff. So another question I have is, how did I feel about getting the vaccine? Like excited. What an opportunity to be my age and my early 30s and to get a shot like that when everyone else is waiting. I felt like super privileged and almost like I don't deserve it. like let someone else go for me. But I know I have a responsibility to my patients that for their well-being, it's in in their best interest that I get the shot. So, I hope they roll this out as soon as possible for everyone else to get it. And if you get the opportunity, you absolutely should. I don't see why you wouldn't. I've looked at the research. I've spoken to physicians about it. Unless you're even pregnant women are starting to get the shot now is what's happening. So there's not much research that says that they shouldn't get the shot. Or if you're trying to have a child, you and your wife or your significant other, then I've been told that you should wait a month after the shot before you start trying. So that's the only other circumstance that I'm hearing that they're saying you shouldn't get the shot. Otherwise, why not? What a wait off. Like after the second shot, now there's still 2 weeks. There's a 2-week grace period after the second shot that technically you could still contract the virus. But like a huge weight off my shoulders. To answer that question directly, like what a weight off of your shoulders to know that, you are less likely, extremely less likely, or I don't want to say absolutely not able to, but less likely to get the virus. Felt great. So I think that's important. And all the research is saying 95 to 100%. at one point I had heard from one of the docs in the office that if you get the vaccine, you can still get the virus and pass it on to somebody, but you'll never be symptomatic. I'm hearing that's gone now too. There's been research out recently, and I'll make sure I send that over to you guys. That is that's in the show notes. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But I've heard that that's not even the case now, where that you're not able to contract the virus even if you've gotten the vaccine asymptomatically and then transmit it that way as well. So, do I have any recommendations on how to plan for receiving the vaccine? Take the day off. Take the next day off. Don't make any plans, especially after the second shot. The first shot, you should be fine. Your arm's going to be sore, so get it in your non-dominant arm for sure. But otherwise, even after the first shot, your arm's going to be sore. So I would get it in your non-dominant arm would be my recommendation, and don't make plans for after the second shot. I wanted to high fed after each dose. The first dose was nothing. Fine. The second dose, like I said, I kind of went over those symptoms already. And then how has receiving the vaccine changed how I treat patients? Actually, it hasn't. Our precautions are the same per CDC guidelines. So we don't have, I forget the number off the top of my head, but I know there are no more than ever 25 people in the clinic at this point in time. So we're still abiding by those rules in terms of number, restrict the number of people and, per capacity. And then the other thing is we're also wearing masks. I think CDC says that in small groups of vaccinated people, you don't have to wear a mask. That's not the case in our clinic. We're kind of abiding by the old rules. Everyone's wearing a mask all the time. So the only thing we've done different is that our vaccinated physical therapists are able to eat in the same room. Before that wasn't the case. One person was allowed to eat at a time, and in our back room. But now we're there's 2 or 3 of us eating in the back room at the same time. So that's the extent of what's changed. But how I treat patients, no, nothing. Our sports performance is still, they're also wearing masks all the time. Our patients are still wearing masks all the time, whether they're on the treadmill or not. So there's really no leniency with that until we're all vaccinated. So I'm trying to think what else is important to add to this. The outlook for sports with this is interesting to me. There are teachers, my brother being a teacher, we'll have him on the podcast soon. He is a teacher at Sun Valley High School. He coaches football and coaches baseball. He, along with many other teachers, have been eligible for the vaccination and have gotten the vaccine. So how does that, how can that be implemented into like everyday real like sports? I think if you work indoors with a team, if you're a coach of an indoor team, you should be getting vaccinated. Get the vaccine, especially if you're eligible for it. I mean, I think we're at a point now where like there are lists out there that if there's extra medication or extra vaccines at the end of the day, like they'll call you and they'll tell you, hey, listen, we have 3 Pfizers left. Do you want a slot at this time? For people who weren't able to make it in because Pfizer needs to be kept at a certain temperature, and once it's taken out of that temperature, that environment, then it's got to be used or it gets tossed out. So, I mean, if you want to get vaccinated, you can get vaccinated, within the limitations of rules. So, you don't have to do anything sneaky to get vaccinated nowadays. At least that's how it seems to me. So if you're indoors, get vaccinated. Indoors with teams, you should get vaccinated. In terms of outdoors, if you can get vaccinated, obviously. But I think it's okay. As long as you're wearing masks and you're keeping your distance and you got to keep the nose covered, if you can do it, why not? I'll go back. I'll reference the Dr. Webner podcast, and everything still applies from when we had that podcast months ago. If you can run and wear a mask, then run and wear a mask, right? So continue to abide by the rules, follow the CDC guidelines. I think that's probably the most important thing to do right now is follow CDC guidelines. I know some schools are allowing students to be within 3 feet of one another. Again, that should be fine. The teachers are vaccinated. So, as far as I know, students, children are not contracting this virus at the same rate as adults. Adolescents, I've heard as young as like 13, 14, they are. But children are not. So that's to my knowledge. If there's something else out there, please let me know. And I'll share my research with you guys. But nonetheless, indoors, get vaccinated. Outdoors, not as much of a must to get vaccinated. I wouldn't not let my child participate in outdoor activities or sports if their coach wasn't vaccinated, assuming they're wearing masks. That would be my recommendation. In the end, based on everything I'm reading and listening to and hearing, having conversation with docs, it seems like herd immunity, which is when a majority of the public has the antibodies to the vaccine, is at about 75 to 80%, right? So that's the goal. That's when you've officially have herd immunity. We should be there, from everything I'm hearing, somewhere between early July to late August, somewhere in that 2-month window. What it's going to take is if you're eligible to get the vaccine, you got to get vaccinated. If there are people who don't want to get vaccinated for different reasons, then that's going to slow that process down and limit our ability to kind of go back to a normal life without masks 24/7. So it's in my experience, I felt great afterwards. The next day I was fatigued, but I mean, to give that up, to have a day of fatigue and pain or whatever else, fever, chills, worth it because you're contributing to society and getting this country of ours back to normal. So I think that's pretty much everything I have. Is there anything else I missed, you think?
Do you think that would you recommend, since you said that, to take a day off, like if a team is getting it, cancel practice that day? Like, how would you think it affects an athlete the day after they get the vaccine?
Yeah, good question. So how do I think it affects a team or an athlete the day after they get the vaccine? I wouldn't count on having, and kids may be different because there's not a ton of research on that, or adults. I know pretty well, but younger adults shouldn't be as impacted. However, they are more impacted by the vaccine than older adults. I would count the day out. I would call off practice. My recommendation is have Tylenol ready to take and drink water. That's the best thing to do. So practice, competition, I wouldn't bank on any of that. If you get the vaccination on Monday, Tuesday, I would don't bank on going to practice, and drink your water and take Tylenol as needed. That would be per the physician, not me. That's their recommendation to make. I can't recommend taking any medications, but that's what I did. I had a couple Tylenol, I think twice, and the rest of it was just hydration.
Is there any scenario that you think someone should not get it, or that they should wait, based off of your own experience and research? Yeah,
the only thing I've seen in research, and we're going back probably a couple of weeks, I'm not sure if anything new has come out, is if you're trying to conceive a child. So if you're trying to conceive with your significant other, then that's different. I would say hold off. In a perfect world, you're able to hold that off and get the vaccine, and then begin that process thereafter. But that's not my business to tell anyone when they can and can't do that. So, that is the only situation. Even pregnant mothers are saying it's okay for a pregnant mother to get the vaccine. I'm not sure if they're saying that means that the unborn child will also be vaccinated. I'm not sure if that carries over. I didn't see that on there, but that's something I've researched throughout the show later on. But there hasn't been any long-term effects to it, to my understanding. I'm sure we'll see some, I'm sure. But to the significance that would, have us stop vaccinating people across the world, I doubt it. So now that other than the conception of a child, I got nothing. I say go for it.
And does this greater availability of the vaccine make you hopeful for the future of athletics and just the future of us getting to be a little more active in our everyday lives?
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no other way. There's variants now, right? So what that means is, people who aren't as well versed in some medicine, is that like bacteria, viruses even more so will modify themselves, create different variants to be more effective in what viruses want to do. Therefore, if you don't finish your what I'm looking for here. So if you're sick and you take an antibiotic and you don't finish your antibiotics, whatever made you sick, that bacteria is more likely to transform itself and then be able to attack you again or others. So you got to kill it. You got to finish it. And that's what's going on with the vaccine. So if we don't all get vaccinated, these variants, is what they're calling them, will continue to form. And now the vaccine will not be as effective. That's why there's so much urgency behind rolling it out as soon as possible and getting everyone as vaccinated as soon as possible to stop all of this, to stop the variants from forming. Right now, they're not variant enough. There's not as much variance. So we're all protected right now. But if this process takes a long time and these variants become more variant, then we're looking at an ineffectiveness of the current variant of the current vaccine that we have. So like the flu shot. Flu shot's a good example. We get a different flu shot every year. And that's because they're trying to predict what variant of the influenza virus is going to attack most that year. And it's extremely difficult to predict. But what they don't want to do is have to create a vaccine like the flu shot every single year that all of us have to take. So, and we're not talking, the flu is very different than influenza virus is very different than the COVID virus. COVID virus is much more deadly and it's easier to transmit from person to person. So, with that being said, I'm very optimistic if we can all get vaccinated ASAP. That's the key to all this. If a quarter of the population is holding out and doesn't want to do it, then that jeopardizes the other 75% that did get it, and more risk for variants. Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, listen, thanks again to all of our listeners. And if there's anything that we can do or address to help get you guys the information that you want, let us know. But that's a wrap.
Thanks for listening to the On Cue Performance Therapy Podcast. If you like this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It would mean so much to me if you could leave us a 5-star review so more listeners like you could get this important information. See you next time.